Demos have an alluring quality. Sketches of what a song could be. Scrappy drafts filled with potential, completely free from overplay. That energy, that naivety, is very hard to recapture. There's a term used for when musicians get too attached to the demo versions of their songs. Demoitis. And the La's Lee Mathers is the patron saint of demoitis. A man that in his mind, whether due to perfectionism or paranoia, has yet to truly nail his debut album. You may also know him as being an architect of Britpop, the sculptor of the finest indie love song of the 1980s. This is New British Canon, and this is the story of There She Goes. Mike Badger formed the La's in Liverpool in 1983, with Lee Mathers joining a year later on guitar. Various coincidences convinced Badger that their union was kismet. Though Liverpool natives, both had been in London at the same time, had met up and concurrently discovered the left-of-centre work of Captain Beefheart. Badger's subconscious sealed the deal. I had this dream about the name The La's. I hurried back to Liverpool, and as I got off the coach to go to my Mars, there's Lee at the bus stop. It was a signal. I phoned him up the next day and we got together in his sister's bedroom with acoustic guitars and wrote My Girl Sits Like a Reindeer, which became Feelin' after I left. It worked. It was me ranting in my style, and Lee coming up with riffs. Though music in 80s Liverpool was defined by the Eric's Club scene, the art school likes of Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, and Wah. The La's marked themselves out as separate, embodying a ramshackle, skiffle, rockabilly sound, and acoustic guitars in a time when electric was king. Their lineup reflected this shambolic nature, being in a state of flux until 1986, when bassist John Powell was inducted after Badger met him at a government-funded unemployed musicians scheme. By this point, Mathers had started writing and singing his own songs, in contrast with Badger's, leaning towards British invasion-era pop. When I joined aged 19, Lee played me Son of a Gun, Doldrum, Freedom Song, and maybe another.
Run, run, rabbit, run, you're a son of a gun. Then you know what you can do, just get up, cross it down. I'm not scared to die, God help me. We went to the...
At that time, about 25 lads in Liverpool knew about the La's. But it was obvious that Lee was on a par with all the classic 60s and 70s stuff I was listening to. His songwriting was untouchable, and songs were just flowing out of him. Powell was a rudimentary bassist, but could be easily taught. What he brought with him was a boost in fanbase. The lads he was knocking around with, packing future shows at Liverpool staples The Picket and Everyman. Those that saw them play knew that the La's was special. Tommy Scott, later of Space, was so impressed that it prompted him to completely rethink his then band, Hello Sunset, feeling hopeless in comparison. By the end of 1986, Badger and Mathers were clashing. December saw them play a show almost every day, while at the same time Mathers had been slowly removing Badger's songs from their setlist, gaining confidence, and subtly taking over the band. These tensions led to a pre-gig confrontation, and Badger quitting the band that he had formed. We'd done all the work, and that's when all the problems started. Mathers said to me, "Your time's nearly up in this band." And I was like, "What? It's not your band, mate." I said I'm off, packed my guitar, and got on the bus. I was gutted. 2 years' work gone overnight. With their dazzling live shows around Liverpool, and sending demos down to London, they had attracted the attention of various indie labels. The band soon signed to Andy McDonald's Go Discs in mid-1987, then home of Billy Bragg and the House Martins, with Badger's replacement Paul Hemmings on guitar and John Timo Timpson on drums. The La's released their first single, The Waltzing Desire for Escape, Way Out, in October 1987.
Give it all you got now. Give it all you got now.
But while recording the single, they would encounter an issue that would recur through the history of the La's. Lee Mathers found it hard to capture the band's sound in the studio. Way Out was eventually recorded by Gavin McKillop at Townhouse Studio, but not before a failed session with John Porter at Matrix Studios a couple of months earlier, and the version Godis released was still not up to Mathers' standards. He was a disciple of lo-fi, before that was really even an accepted concept. He wanted a warm, analog sound, full of life. He wanted the organic hisses and hums of early Mono, Who and Stone singles.
Substitute your lies for fact. I see right through your plastic. There's just no place for Spider-Man.
In Mathers' opinion, despite their poor quality, some of the La's demos approached this feel.
This I gave for all mankind. Sail away on the ocean wave. I know you can't stand on your own two feet.
Love is all, the world will fall, but this is all we came here for.
But in the age of digital recording and synthesizers, few studios and producers were able to get him what he wanted. And so began his quest to find the right sound for the La's debut. Paul Hemming's parents had a sizable Victorian house in Liverpool, with a disused stable in the back. It was here that the La's would rehearse for a few months in 1987. During this time they would record the only track officially released by Go Discs that fit Mathers' elusive search for the correct audio feel, the future B-side Over, recorded in a barn on a tape deck. Lee loved Over. My mum had bought me this Ghetto Blaster tape deck, and he used to record everything on that, just to remember things basically, little fragments of ideas. Over came together incredibly quickly. It was a lovely hot summer's day. We turned it on and it just happened. The whole thing just flowed. That's one of those moments which you could never recapture. You record it the first time, and you never get it again. It was also around this time that Mathers wrote the band's signature song, There She Goes. Constructed from a cycling riff and a loved-up lyric about an unknowable girl.
There she goes again.
Hemmings added a complimentary riff on top. And with a touch of the Velvet Underground's There She Goes Again.
There she goes again.
It was pretty much complete. 2.5 near-perfect minutes of jangle pop romanticism and yearning.
Racing through my brain, and I just can't take.
The first time the band played it live at the Picket in June 1987, the crowd could tell that this was a hit, even with a jarringly different middle eight.
There she calls my name, holds my train, no one else can do.
Though referring to the female she throughout, many have speculated that the song is in fact about heroin addiction, a key line seemingly implying that the love is for the drug.
Pulsing through my veins, and I just can't take.
But when asked, all members have denied the association. Mathers would later have his moment with that particular drug, but at the time of writing he was too broke to be experimenting with anything, aside from weed and a touch of LSD. Inspiration for Mathers was always a bit more cosmic than most. The phrasing, the rhythms just come to me, and then I trace over them, like with tracing paper, the words and melody. I usually take 5 minutes to write a song. It just happens. It's like a medium, his mind takes over. It's when he's not there he gets all his information, right? I'm not talking about drugs or anything, but the subconscious is always better than the conscious. There's star material, not like pop star shit. There's a light in all of us. You've just got to levitate to the right level. Though pretty much fully formed, it would take about a year after the Pickett show, as well as 3 different producers and studios, before recording anything that saw a release. After a supposedly unusable session with Cure producer David M. Allen at Easy Studios in London in October, they tried again with John Leckie at Chipping Norton Studio in March 1988, a few months before he started work on the Stone Roses debut. Leckie was keen to note Mather's unique way of working, seemingly unable to explain exactly what he wanted to the producer. Lee was also inclined to talk in a kind of Scouse psychobabble. He'd spend half an hour describing the way he'd want the guitar to sound. Things like wanting to capture the sound of the tree it was made from. Or he decided he didn't like a particular cable because it was yellow. John Powell was a bit like that too, but when he did it, there was an element of humour. Lee seemed serious. Mathers knew his songs were good, but in the studio he was never able to capture the feel of the demos. Stuck burning through label money with nothing to show, Go Discs momentarily halted their wages. This, plus playing the same songs again and again hoping for better results, wore on his bandmates. After Timo left in late 1987, the band cycled through 2 other drummers, before settling momentarily on Chris Sharrock in mid-1988. Hemmings also departed before the single version of There She Goes was recorded. The guitar here played by John Boo Byrne. It's hard when you're repeatedly trying to capture in studio something that had a great degree of spontaneity to it, as those early demos did. That was quite frustrating for Lee. You went into studios and it just didn't capture it. You didn't get the same sound. In July 1988, the La's teamed up with Bob Andrews at Woodcray Studios in Wokingham. He'd previously worked with Jonah Louie, Tempole Tudor, and the Bluebells. But as all would, he found working with Lee Mathers challenging. By this point, Mathers was asking engineers to set up microphones in trees, and in another session, inside a Steinway piano, in the hopes that they could pick up the vibrations of the strings as he sang into it. He also had become adamant that concert pitch was incorrect, and began tuning his guitar to the frequency of refrigerator buzz. While we got on quite well, he was hard to deal with. We were in a residential studio, so after dinner I might mention something the song needed, and Lee would be, right, let's do it now, and we'd go back in the studio at 11 o'clock at night. Then the next day he might not like it, then another day he might like it again, but I had to strike while the iron was hot. From these sessions, Go Disc claimed a version of There She Goes, for release in November 1988. With its punchier 2-bar introduction, and Boo's beautiful bell-like guitars that justified journalistic descriptors like jangling and chiming, the song failed to crack the UK Top 50. The sound Mathers wanted still evaded him. By July 1989, they had tallied an additional 2 studio sessions without a usable album. Both in Liverpool, the 8-Track Attic, where they self-produced, and the Pink Museum with producer Jeremy Allen. Go Discs retrieved timeless melody from the latter.
In your mind, do you know what you will find?
Printed copies, and sent it to Radio and Press, where it was named Single of the Week by Melody Maker. A song about songs, amongst the lush harmonies and sparkling guitars, it expands on Mathers' divination process of songwriting.
A melody always finds me where the thought reminds me.
However, it didn't sound just right, so Mathers forced the label to withdraw the single at the last moment. At this point, he'd gone beyond perfectionism, into sheer paranoia that these songs he'd been talking up in the press for the past 2 years might not be as good as he thought. The La's had existed since 1983, and by mid-1989 they had released 2 singles. By now the La's consisted of Mathers, Power, Barry Sutton on guitar, and Chris Sharrock on drums. With a vested interest in getting a La's album in the can, Label owner Andy McDonald set the band up with Mike Hedges of early Cure and Banshees fame. While on its face an odd fit, the Lars not being reverby post-punk types, Hedges had recently acquired a 16-channel mixing desk that had been used at Abbey Road. The hope was, with this, Mathers could finally find the sound he was looking for. Assembling the desk at McDonald's parents' house in Devon, the band spent a 10-day session re-recording the songs yet again. This time, it looked promising. That was until McDonald made a tactical error. Everyone thought it was great. Lee loved it, Andy was buzzing. Then Andy gave me and Chris £800 or something, each, to go on holiday. I think he wanted us out of the way so he could get in Lee's ear to mix it. But if so, it backfired. Lee got the hump because he didn't come on holiday with us. When we came back, he'd scrapped everything. The Mike Hedges sessions were probably the closest Mathers got to what he wanted, but has since said that shelving them was an attempt to take back control of his band, that as they had briefly left for Hawaii, they weren't as committed to the music as he was. His print the legend excuse was that the desk wasn't coated in the original 60s dust, and therefore couldn't possibly sound right. During his 11 months in the band, Barry Sutton had 3 separate failed versions of these songs under his belt, and was increasingly bewildered in his position. Mathers had him play certain portions of songs 10 different times with emphasis on 10 different parts, leaving Sutton confused about what Mathers actually wanted and whether it was actually possible for him to achieve it. I don't want to make Lee out as a bad guy, because he's very funny, but the atmosphere he creates isn't conducive to people doing their best work. There's a lot of attention paid to the exact phrasing of parts, strange guitar tunings, a lot of pressure. My playing was suffering. I was deeply paranoid all the time. When I was sacked, it came as a relief. Sutton and Sharrock were replaced by Peter Cammy Camel on guitar, and Lee's brother Neil Mathers on drums. In December 1989, the Lars had a final crack at recording their first album at Eden Studios in London with XTC, Peter Gabriel and U2 producer Steve Lillywhite.
And if your night your sense is happy, it must be happy.
Initially, Mathers was impressed by this last-ditch attempt at a producer. Talking to Sounds in January 1990, he called him patient. He's got focus and he's a producer in that he sets the environment that we work best in. But as always, Mathers got in his own way. I knew the songs were absolute diamonds, but getting them on tape wasn't so easy. Lee Mathers had this blueprint in his head for the record, but it was like an acid trip that kept coming back to him, and it would mess him up. We'd record 6 songs that were fantastic, but if there was one thing wrong on the 7th, he'd be convinced that everything else was terrible, and we'd have to start everything all over again. Lillywhite's go-to methods of click tracks and recording piecemeal were anathema to a band like the Lars, who wanted a lively, organic sound, but still they were making progress. According to Mathers, the sessions broke down when he found a dossier titled A Producer's Guide to Dealing with Lee Mathers, a list of do's and don'ts to temper his more eccentric tendencies. A blow-up ensued, resulting in the band walking out of the sessions, never to return. Over 3 years, the Lars had gone through 8 producers, 9 studios, numerous bandmates, and cost Go Discs at least £1 million. And they still had no album to show for it. The label had allowed their artist to follow his muse, and got nothing in return. So in an attempt to recoup some of their losses, they rehired Lillywhite to put the album together from available tapes, and released it as the band's self-titled debut in October 1990. Neither the title, artwork, nor tracklist was chosen by the band, but still it featured 12 of the tracks they spent most of the band's lifetime trying to capture on record, including the spirited Mersey beat of IOU. The cribbed I Feel Fine motif of Feelin'. the Kinks' Music Hall March of Freedom song.
I'm not scared to die, God help me. We went to the sea.
And the Bo Diddley Shuffle of Liberty Ship.
I gave for all mankind, sail away on an ocean wave.
And though written 4 years earlier, the eponymous Son of a Gun had begun resembling Mathers.
He was bit by the 20th century.
A man who had become stuck inside his own head.
Now he's doing time in the back of his mind. He could hit them outside.
But it's really sad because, as I say, during the recording, he would start playing a song, another song. And I said, oh, it was like, who did that song? That's a great song. He goes, no, that's mine, La. I said, oh, can we record it? He says, no, that's for the second album. And I remember this song called Fishing Net. It was a great song. So, you know, he had great songs. He still has great songs for the second album. But he, for some reason, it just was not it.
Upon the eventual release of the La's self-titled album, it was greeted with warm reviews and entered the UK chart at number 30. Preceding its emergence, Go Discs tried again and wrangled the Lillywhite version of Timeless Melody to an actual single release, peaking at number 57. However, Mathers disowned this version of the album and spent every promotional opportunity telling the listening public of his damning feelings, and that no one should buy it. It's the worst thing I've ever heard, bar nothing. I can detach myself from it, and it's unmusical, it's out of tune.
Then you know what you can do, but just get up a fuss and shout.
And the worst thing about it is the singing, because they took the backing tracks from the first 2 weeks we were in the studio, and used the guide vocals. It's flat, out of tune, out of time.
Get on the bus, get
I wouldn't have minded what they've done if it sounded good. A re-release of There She Goes at the end of October 1990 would finally get the song in the UK Top 20. Where it remained for 3 weeks, helped in part by radio DJs playing it to celebrate Margaret Thatcher's concurrent resignation. In 1991, the band spent 6 weeks touring the US, Canada and Japan, Mathers deferring most of his interview duties to Power after journalists continued to quiz him on why he hated his own album. However, some changes were happening. While the La's setlist had remained pretty much the same 15 to 20 songs for the last 5 years, Power started to attempt to push for his own songs.
Won't you follow me down? No, nothing you don't know.
But like before with Mike Badger, Mathers was unwilling to cede control. When they played a show at the Town and Country Club in London, Mathers refused to sing harmonies on Follow Me Down.
Won't you follow me down?
It was guitars down and head to head between me and Lee. It was always, you know, if you're not gonna sing on my song, I'm not gonna sing on your fucking song. Just schoolyard shit like. So I just started shouting into the mic, sing the fucking backing vocals. And then we stopped and it all went off. By December 1991, John Power, the only person to stick by Mathers through the full length of their studio hell, walked away to form his own band, Cast.
Just walk away, walk away, walk away.
Though the La's pretty much ended after John Power left, there were still fleeting appearances from Mathers. The band spoiled Oasis in December 1984, with Cammy now playing bass and new recruit Lee Garnett on guitar. The band just jamming on There She Goes over and over again or High, the power being cut after they long exceeded their stage time. Rumours swirled that Mathers was deep into heroin, had a personal collection of authentic 60s dust, and perhaps most troubling of all, he was still trying to record his first album. The La's missed their moment. Around the time of Way Out in 1987, they were being heralded as ones to watch. If their debut had arrived a month or two after, they, with The Farm, could have maybe got a late 80s Liverpool moment together. Instead, in the time it took the La's to release one album, Manchester bands The Stone Roses and Happy Mondays emerged, rose, and were on the way out. They had delayed for an entire musical movement. As the 90s progressed, another Northern English band with a 60s fetish began dominating the charts.
I need to be myself.
Alongside the Beatles, Stones and Roses, the La's were one of Noel Gallagher's favourite bands. Mere weeks after the release of their first single, he stated that Oasis want to finish what the La's started. In fact, the whole of Britpop, with its backward-looking musicality, chiming guitars, and the occasional nameless she, was just extrapolating on the work of Lee Mathers. And an entire scene of half acoustic, half electric, British indie owes its sound to the La's.
I still need you, but I don't want you now. Oh, what became of forever love? Yellow line taking forever, pull ourselves together.
But when I see the signs, I'll jump on that lightning bolt. Yeah, I remember t-shirt weather. I remember Sundays.
At its essence, it was a continuation of classic British pop. The way that Oasis's The Importance of Being Idle pilfers the introduction of the La's Clean Profit. Which in turn often sounds quite like the Kinks' Sunny Afternoon.
Take me by the hand, I cannot see. Save me from this squeeze.
It's all connected. When I see him, I say, "Hey Lee, when are you going to release your second album?" And he goes, Yeah, I'll do it when I finish the first one. He's still trying to nail his first set of songs right after 27 years. So I've come to the conclusion he's either shit scared of ruining his legacy, or he's just a lazy c***. In 2003, La's fan M.W. Masefield attempted to track down Lee Mathers, now a reclusive figure rarely seen in public, and through interviewing his former bandmates, he draws his own conclusions about his hero, this Syd Barrett, Brian Wilson character who has lost himself in the creative process. So when he finally did find him, an Everton-supporting father of four living in an unassuming semi-detached house in the suburbs of Liverpool, it came as quite the surprise. No heroin, no 60s dust, just living off the royalties of various versions of There She Goes, still with designs to get his album made. People think that I say those demos are the gospel. They're not. They're just a photograph, and not a great one. But the album isn't even near that. I'd rather take them on a desert island than that album any day. The demos are warm and they've got vibe and character. That's all. 35 years on, it is becoming increasingly unlikely that Lee Mathers is going to record the definitive version of his first album. Less so that he's going to put out album 2, but not impossible. Every few years there's a report of activity, including actual reunion shows in both 2005 and 2011. As well as supposedly working with Pete Doherty's Baby Shambles in 2009. It might still happen. Until then, his genius lives on, racing through your brain. The songs that it contains, the feeling, that remains. Thanks for watching. So what other bands and artists with limited catalogues would you have loved to hear more from? Comment down below. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and why don't you also do me a favour and share it with a couple of people? It really does help. As always, I'd like to shout out this month's new top tier supporter over on Patreon, Communication Kid. And thanks to everyone else that supports me. And I'll see you in 3 weeks' time for some adding, kissing, and blistering.